Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Business Development from Start to Scale. We are in week 12 with the theme of Business Development Case Studies. In this lecture, the 58th in the series, we discuss the topic of business turbulence. So far, we have seen several case studies of companies growing through business strategy and business development. In this lecture, we will consider the case of a successful company undergoing significant business turbulence, partly due to external factors and partly due to internal management factors, and therefore get into business turbulence. And what happened thereafter as a non performing asset is also covered in this lecture. This case again is on Orchid Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals Limited, whose establishment, growth, and strategic transformation between the years 1992 and 2010 had few parallels in the pharmaceutical industry of India. Orchid's case study reflects the process of establishing and developing a business in a structured way. Fundamentally, you have to identify the industry to operate in, develop the business strategy, execute the project, create product manufacturing and other competencies, develop business organically and inorganically. If inorganic, establish strategic alliances and partnerships. Business strategy itself includes all functional strategies, including but not limited to product strategy, manufacturing strategy, supply chain strategy, financial strategy, marketing strategy, and human resources strategy. Some of these slides and some of these points would have been seen by you earlier. However, I am recalling them for cohesion as far as this lecture is concerned. Orchid's remarkable growth story reflects all the key business development options that we have considered earlier in this course, namely collaborations, alliances, subsidiaries, joint ventures, mergers, and acquisitions. As I said, every industry has to choose its canvas of initial operation. Orchid had a large canvas of pharmaceutical products to choose from in terms of therapies and products, from anti-infectives, gastrointestinal, oncology, CNS, CVS to endocrinology, ENT, pain, and vitamins. And within each, it could get into bulk drugs, that is active pharmaceutical ingredients, or formulations, that is finished dosage forms, or be in both. There were therefore at least 54 ways in which the entrepreneurial startup could establish itself. The startup chose, rightly so, anti-infectives. Even within each, several product classifications were possible. Therefore, the question is which anti-infectives? Within anti-infectives, the choice had to be carefully made given the presence of over 9 types of anti-infective products in popular use. The choice was beta-lactam antibiotics starting with cephalosporins and within the API. Again, together with the previous grid, this grid demonstrates that there could be over 100 ways of starting the business. However, not all the ways would be equal in growth potential. Every startup has to choose the starting point in an appropriate manner. The first strategy was built around an initial pivot of active pharmaceutical ingredients, that is bulk drugs, oral Ceph APIs, sterile Ceph APIs, and then kept on adding more cephalosporin APIs. Choice of the anti-infective therapeutic group and market segment from the business development perspective laid a solid foundation for the startup phase with strong growth potential. The question could still be why API? There are reasons for a company to choose APIs. Similarly, there are reasons why a company could choose formulations at the start of the journey. APIs are technology and investment intensive. They have complex chemistry and chemical engineering. They give rise to several environmental issues. And on the positive side, those products are marketable to many companies, including Big Pharma. The features of API business are that they are technology intensive and they are also investment intensive. Therefore, only those companies which would like to build huge entry barriers would like to go to APIs. In respect of the formulations, the technology is simpler, investments are lower. The manufacturing process itself is simpler but finer. Lot of simple but complex, a more oxymoron you may think, but the particle size which is derived through physical and mechanical properties, is so important for the success of the formulation that what is seen to be a simple process will always be complex in formulations. So, coming back to the point, simpler but finer physico mechanical engineering, fewer environmental issues. Therefore, there would be that much scope for many companies to enter, even so for a startup. And the competition with big pharma would arise as opposed to lack of competition or non-competition or even collaboration in respect of the APIs. But the main differentiating factors between APIs and formulations is high entry barriers versus low entry barriers. Within APIs, why cephalosporins? Amongst the various antibiotics, as the firm reviewed its options in 1992, cephalosporin antibiotics emerged as the most important and viable product group that treats a very wide range of infectious diseases. 20 plus individual molecules spanning three generations, both oral and sterile formulations with a wide therapeutic spectrum, relevant for a wide range of clinical settings from at home to intensive care unit treatments. The same molecule in sterile and oral forms, enabling flexibility of step down therapy. High usage in China, the most important market for the firm initially. Complex to develop and manufacture with high investment intensity, therefore, setting up high entry barriers. A few molecules being available also as veterinary application molecules, adding to market potential. Choice of the therapeutic group and market segment from the business development perspective laid a solid foundation for the startup phase with sustainable growth potential. The business strategy was to continuously expand and that too meaningfully. Orchid diversified into a multi horizon business strategy between 1998 and 2008, well supported by industry leading development strategies. The Horizon 1 from 1992 comprised the cephalosporin APIs. Horizon 2 involved addition of non-cephalosporin APIs, non-antibiotic APIs, all formulations for India and all formulations for USA and EU. And Horizon 2 was between 1998 and 2008. Horizon 3, in parallel but with much longer term view, was drug discovery. So R&D facilities, manufacturing facilities and marketing capabilities combined to provide the diversification of business strategy for the company. Conceptually and operationally, the company followed a stepladder growth strategy of rolling out product lines, some sequentially and some in parallel, each duly backed by facilities. The product strategy was highly granulated. By virtue of strong R&D, Orchid became a one-stop shop for antibiotics of multiple generations. Horizon 1 APIs comprised of Ceph APIs which were introduced into commercial production in 1994, followed up by Pen APIs in 2002, Penem APIs in 2006 and NPNC APIs in 2006. Horizon 2 comprising dosage forms involved cephalosporin formulations from 2006, penicillin formulations in 2008, carbapenem formulations from 2009 and NPNC formulations from 2011. In respect of drug discovery, the journey started with anti-infectives in 2004 and extended to other therapy areas from 2006. So, oral cephalosporin antibiotics together with cephalosporin antibiotics in sterile form, together with sterile antibiotics in other therapeutic areas, plus oral other non-antibiotics constituted a complete product basket. If product strategy with R&D was the driver, the state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities were the enablers. The manufacturing strategy was also dedicated. Each of the beta-lactam antibiotics had certain risks of anaphylactic shock in very minute set of population. Therefore, every beta-lactam antibiotic has to be produced in dedicated separate lines with no crisscrossing of men and material movement, that is person and material movement. Therefore, each facility had to be dedicated and separate. So, in the Alatur mother plant, APIs belonging to the cephalosporin range were produced from 1994 and eventually starting with a 5-acre site and becoming a 55-acre site, Alatur facility became the largest such complex globally in a single site. In Aurangabad, Three different separate API blocks were constructed in one site, and these three were for penicillin, carbapenems, and NPNCs. The Irungattukottai formulations facility near Chennai was started from 2004 onwards. Four different separate dosage form facilities were constructed in that single site, but completely different and dedicated for each product group. One for cephalosporins, other for penicillins, another for carbapenems, and the last one for NPNC products. And the way it started was the approach, which is both sequential and step ladder. API manufacturing first, followed by formulations manufacturing, all R&D facilities in parallel, and end-to-end product delivery capability as a result. The company also set up smaller dosage form facilities for CEFs and non-CEFs for less regulated markets. ORLL, the drug discovery subsidiary, began focusing on contract and collaborative development as short, medium term value developers while conducting proprietary drug development as long term value driver. So, the first horizon for ORLL was project based services, the second one, collaborative drug discovery, and the third one, proprietary drug discovery. You can see the clarity in the strategy, focus along with diversification. That has been the mantra for ORCID. Scientific and technological capabilities, global business development capabilities, win-win alliances with big pharma and R&D companies. The kind of multinationals have been illustrated here. All the three streams of drug discovery were carried out in partnership with such big pharma or niche R&D companies. These activities required extensive business development to structure win-win arrangements. As a result of all of these actions that were taken with diligence and with passion, by 2009-10, Orchid Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals became a fully integrated and diversified global pharmaceutical corporation, covering both APIs and dosage forms in multiple therapeutic areas, catering to both regulated and less regulated markets. It had a large employee base, and out of that employee base, over 700 people were scientists and technologists, and they covered R&D, manufacturing, quality, and various other technical disciplines. And we also had 1,000 field personnel in domestic formulations. In terms of financials, the company touched $300 million by that particular year, FY 2010. The combination of the entrepreneurial passion of the founder, the zeal of the leadership team, and the sage counsel of the board constituted a powerful combination to position the company globally. The group structure itself was very elaborate and very imposing. This is a pictorial presentation of the expansive business canvas and corporate structure of Orchid. The three R&D oriented subsidiaries were also unique for their positioning in different therapeutic segments. Vexel Pharma focused on the metabolic diseases. Diacron focused on the cardiovascular diseases, and ORLL focused on a number of multiple therapeutic areas. ORLL served as the lead R&D subsidiary for the firm, and it had sophisticated equipment, and because of the equipment it could support the other two joint ventures in terms of their activities also. Because Orchid had end-to-end R&D and manufacturing capability, it could also produce products for clinical trials. To convert the canvas into execution reality, the company needed to extend the existing API value chain and create new value chains in formulations and drug discovery. As you can see here, the three value chains represented the beginning to the end of pharmaceutical development in the respective domains, and culminating finally in either regulated markets or regulated markets based on the product market strategy chosen. Similarly, in respect of drug discovery, the journey started with medicinal chemistry, trying to find out a chemical molecule that could tackle the disease pathway and finally end up in clinical studies, and final marketing being to big pharma or generic companies. What used to be a simple three-step API value chain expanded in just 5 years to three distinct value chains that covered API, dosage forms, and drug discovery, and they also stood interconnected with each other. This required building up of multiple core competencies which were beyond the reach of even much larger companies during that period, that is, in the early 2000s. Orchid's mega business development approach reflected several business development approaches from inception itself, until 2010 in terms of driving business growth. The first was setting up the base with some meaningful collaborations. Sintoform in 1992, SBD Laboratories in 1994, again in 1997. Thereafter, setting up the healthcare unit, Orchid Healthcare, as a division of the company to conduct formulations business. Then embark upon a number of strategic alliances with both generic companies as well as the big pharma as the product canvas and as well as the business canvas expanded. Setting up the joint ventures in China, 50-50 joint venture with NCPC of China and 50-50 joint venture with Bexel Biotechnology for drug discovery. Then having subsidiaries in USA, Europe and Japan, and expanding the domestic formulations business through a merger and acquisition and adding more capabilities in drug discovery area through the joint venture stake in Diacron. The strategic blueprint was executed with passion and diligence to accomplish the business transformation. You can also see the kind of chronological progress that has happened as part of the Orchid mega business development approach. In that, particularly, establishment of drug discovery activity in 2004 and a string of strategic alliances and subsidiaries that were put in place from 2004 again were the highlights of Orchid's business diversification. Multiple strategic alliances with generic partners in US and Europe for distribution of generic pharmaceutical products and with big pharma for discovery of new chemical entities and providing R&D services constituted the leading part of this strategy. Establishment of subsidiaries in US, EU and Japan was also a highlight of this strategy. Starting from incorporation on July 1, 1992 as a non-executive board member and from August 1998 as a full-time deputy managing director, I could lead the transformation from a bulk drug China-based company into a fully integrated and diversified pharmaceutical corporation oriented towards sterile injectables and related markets. You can see the generic alliances made with the world's leading generic companies. Similarly, you can see the big pharma alliances made with the global leaders in pharmaceutical industry such as Merck, Pfizer, Forest, Aslas, and Zertis. Strategy and structure combined to power relentless business integration and diversification at Orchid Pharma between 2002 and 2010, a period of transforming a first generation enterprise into a global pharma company with few parallels in the Indian pharmaceutical industry. But Orchid encountered the first air pocket in its business growth journey in 2008, and that lasted up to 2010. I would call this the first turbulence at Orchid 2008 to 2010. The company, which seemed to have no threat ever to its enviable growth, had a series of major setbacks starting from 2008. The strategy of leveraged accumulation of shares by the promoter was derailed suddenly. Personal debt leveraged purchase of shares and convertible warrants by the promoter was one of the features of this turbulence. Global liquidity crisis caused by Bear Stearns and Lehman collapse spooked the markets. Orchid shares took a deep plunge, bringing the promoter to a point of losing control. However, that was only part of the problem. The real problem was that Ranbaxy, a leading Indian pharmaceutical company, tried to destabilize the company and the promoter and take over the company. There probably was a plot behind Orchid's adversity that was never known. Orchid's pride is specified in terms of its global capabilities, but is it a case of owner's pride becoming neighbor's envy? Ranbaxy, arguably India's largest pharmaceutical corporation in India in the 2000s, was in 2008-9 negotiating a sellout to Daiichi Sankyo of Japan for an astronomical valuation. There was, however, a spanner in the works in terms of three factors. API. Lack of sustainable API base. Ranbaxy's CEF API base at Mohali was under the threat of closure. The US market was characterized by lack of viable generic pharma contracts. Ranbaxy had a US business, but it was nowhere near Orchid's high-scale, lucrative multi-therapeutic sterile injectable business. Compliance. Ranbaxy had to face or was likely to face adverse FDA actions. Known only to its promoters, Ranbaxy key plants in India, including those specializing in sterile injectables, and the US plants and office were going to face serious quality and compliance issues. Ranbaxy's raid on Orchid's shares apparently took place against this background. Ranbaxy sought control over Orchid's US FDA approved facilities and US generics contracts. Ranbaxy imagined that this hostile acquisition would future proof its business and increase Ranbaxy promoters' own divestment value. When this destabilization happened, Orchid's bankers and investors wanted to know who was in real control of the company. Orchid, sitting on a huge debt pile and needing continuous working capital, faced a crisis of financing. But we didn't stop there. I was assigned to roll back the hostile bid of Ranbaxy. We mounted a spirit defense advocacy with all the stakeholders. More importantly, I, as the deputy managing director, took on the responsibility of stopping the bid in its tracks. There were three aspects to this rolling back of the hostile bid. One, articulation. Ranbaxy was educated on the futility of taking over the company for the sake of contracts that cannot be reneged upon. Collaboration. Ranbaxy was offered API supplies to tide over its potential shortages through a long term supply contract, which it could show to Daiichi if it wanted to. Then, resolve. Ranbaxy were told in no unclear terms that Orchid was not a pushover and the founder would not let go of his company, whatever be the price of exit and the cost of staying on. Ranbaxy was determined and aggressive in its bid. High pressure and intense negotiations happened at New Delhi with Ranbaxy. Finally, truth and justice that were in favor of Orchid prevailed. Rolling back the Ranbaxy hostile bid was a watershed moment in the company's entrepreneurial journey. It also probably taught the promoter the perils of keeping the wrong company. The pledge was undertaken through a group company of Ranbaxy in an ironic, unknown twist until then. In the tale, what happened aftermath? What happened after the takeover saga, which ended in the truce being laid out? The stressful saga of the hostile takeover bid, though stopped in its tracks, took a toll on the company's finances and the long term stability of the business. The company had a few options, however. One, change nothing. Continue with the destabilized operations with ownership and control being called into question from time to time. Because if some company has been able to do this, another company also may be tempted to do this. Face the risk of working capital and business disruption as a result. This option clearly was not acceptable. The second option was to bring a white knight. The company's founder brought in Dr. Cyrus Poonawalla, the founder chairman of Serum Institute of India, as the white knight. However, the endgame was unclear to both the white knight and the promoter. I brought in a strategic partner. The company also pursued bringing in a strategic marketing partner as a strategic investor. Hospira fit the bill admirably because the products that were signed for distribution with Hospira were yet to be put into the marketplace. Hospira was a specialist in sterile injectables business, so Orchid's sterile injectables business was carved out and offered for 100% acquisition by Hospira. So, what happened thereafter? Hospira acquired Orchid sterile injectable formulations business in March 2010. The value chain, API to formulations, remained unchanged with Orchid continuing to be the supplier of APIs to Hospira and Orchid continuing to do its formulations that were not covered by the carve out. Hospira would supply oral cephalosporin formulations from its acquired IKKT facility to Orchid. The transaction was valued at 100 million US dollars. A margin was provided on all API supplies from Orchid, and a non-compete came in force for 10 years. Certain less regulated markets were allowed for Orchid to market based on outsourced manufacture. Orchid's DMD, that is myself, moved as MD of Hospira's acquired Orchid business and grew it manifold over my 5+ year tenure there. What happened at Hospira India during this period of 2010 to 2015 is an instructive lesson of how things could go right if the strategy is correct and if the finances are appropriate. Hospira was a global pharmaceutical company getting all of its turnover from all markets other than India. Hospira was also a global company which had manufacturing facilities in several parts of the world but none in India. However, when Hospira took over the sterile injectables business of Orchid, the idea was to shift the center of gravity to India. When so many other generic companies could have distribution alliances or some kind of partial manufacturing arrangements, why can't we? Thought Hospira. So the acquisition took place. But I was able to advocate a much deeper and much wider presence in India than what Hospira's leadership team envisaged at the time of purchase of the sterile injectables business. So the Global Sterile Injectable Corporation, that is Hospira, became an India-centric R&D and D and manufacturing corporation. Antibiotic sterile formulations R&D, antibiotic sterile formulations manufacturing, and capable of being exported to parent corporation were the three drivers of the initial phase of Hospira. As the MNC started with the simple strategy of acquiring the sterile injectable business R&D and manufacturing with drug filings and pipeline, having the US FDA approvals, the core or the seed of this business expansion out of India started. However, once the initial objective was achieved, the Indian subsidiary and the global parent began drawing up major strategic expansion and diversification blueprint for the Indian operations, duly advocated by the local leadership. It had four components: doubling of capacities in the acquired antibiotics business, both R&D and manufacturing; establishment of greenfield state-of-the-art injectables facility in Vizag; acquisition of sterile and non-sterile API facilities; and establishment of new R&D centers in medical device, software, and biologics. The strategic blueprint required that the acquired core competencies are leveraged for the new greenfield project and new skills are acquired for the new R&D centers. The organization redesign involved having a good balance of global and local with high level of alignment. The way it was done was through a matrix organization. There is a global CEO, Mike Ball, for the Hospira Global Corporation, and four verticals can be thought about for this particular discussion: global operations, global R&D, global human resources, and global finance. Indian CEO, that is myself, had similarly four critical verticals under me: Indian operations, Indian R&D, Indian human resources, and Indian finance. There were, of course, various other requirements like regulatory affairs, information technology. Similarly, they were there at global level as well. The global departments provided functional expertise, while the local departments assembled Indian and overseas returnee Indian scientific diaspora. This helped in a rapid build-up of competencies with high scale in India. The graphic below represents a further drill down of the global local matrix, which provided expert to expert global local linkages while simultaneously ensuring leadership alignment at higher echelons of the organization. So you can see the entire operation reporting to global operations, but individually each subsegment of the Indian operations had a global expert to advise and help. While the matrix may look complex, it worked seamlessly on the ground due to leadership and expertise alignment. It also represented a great example of central guidance with regional empowerment and autonomy. This is what every global corporation would aspire for, but not many would be able to achieve the way we could achieve in Hospira Global and Hospira India interface. As a result of this, significant scale up and skill accumulation on a scale rather unprecedented in the generic pharmaceutical industry could be achieved. Several first in class achievements were notched up in a short span of 4 years. Expansion from 1 to 9 sites with presence in southern and western India, brownfield acquisitions, increase in employees from 450 to 4,500, greenfield creations, increase in product range covering both antibiotics and non-antibiotics as well as dosage forms and API, expansion and diversification in R&D capabilities. Most importantly, the count of senior leaders, which was 14 at the time of acquisition of the sterile injectable business from Orchid in 2010, rose to 100 by the time I laid down my office in a formal manner. So, this kind of technology and capital intensive growth was unprecedented and was also responsible for shifting the center of gravity of Hospira to India in a manner of speaking. Multiple R&D competencies were institutionalized. The number of scientists in pharmaceutical R&D increased from 100 to 200. Scientists in APA R&D increased from 100 to 150. Scientists in device R&D from a zero base increased to 200. Biologics R&D increased from zero base to 200. Regulatory affairs and medical affairs increased from 200 to 500. Organizational redesign was the foundation of business transformation. Skill build-up and employee scale-up were the twin drivers of phenomenal growth in scientific, technological, and business base. That is how the organizational redesign took place. Similarly, the levers in organizational redesign reflected what any other world class management consultant would advocate: global with local scale up. In fact, in 2013, McKinsey conducted a survey on large scale organizational change, surveying nearly 800 executives. 82% of all respondents say that they have experienced a redesign, significant changes in organizational structure at either the corporate, functional, or business unit level at their current companies. So, what are the typical levers of organizational redesign? Performance management, business process, roles, governance, culture, management process, reporting lines, span of control, geographic footprint, systems and technology, talent, decision rights, linkages, products, and process. Nearly two-thirds stated that their most recent redesigns sought to facilitate the organization's focus on strategic priorities, and more than half say their redesigns aim to improve the focus on growth. And that's what we did without even referring to the survey or its results. My stint in Hospira, the global pharmaceutical company between 2010 and 2015, was notable for these kinds of expansive and diversifying business moves and infrastructure creation. Starting from the acquisition of the sterile injectables business of Orchid in 2010, as I said, I headed the business establishment and business expansion till end September 2015 as managing director and executive chairman. The second appointment being for the last 6 months, from one site to 10 sites and from 450 employees to 4,500. The growth of Hospira India in just over 5 years has been phenomenal. 2010 sterile injectables acquisition, doubling of capacity. 2013 more R&D, API and injectables. Greenfield injectables facility at Vizag, device software and biosimilar R&D facilities in Chennai, expansion of R&D capacity in Chennai. 2015 it became a multi-site, multi-product footprint and was acquired by Pfizer, in part for the kind of value that existed in India, apart from the global value. Dovetailing with global R&D, manufacturing and marketing network, integrated antibiotic value chain, API to dosage forms, Aurangabad API acquisition for penicillins, penems and others. From an initial concept of limited competitive advantage in antibiotic cephalosporin injectables manufacture, Hospira footprint rapidly expanded to cover other sophisticated injectables with massive state-of-the-art capacity building in R&D and manufacturing. That was made possible by advocacy at India organization level, in active collaboration with global leadership, and the forward-looking nature of both the Indian and global leadership teams. Now let's come back to Orchid's deep business turbulence, which started happening simultaneously under the continued Orchid ownership. From 2012 onwards, Orchid hit a tough spot, and Orchid had to eventually go into resolution under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of India through the National Company Law Tribunal activities. I must say that this does not purport to be an accurate descriptor of the Orchid resolution process. Broad contours are presented for educative purposes. Again, no judgments. Orchid witnessed sharp decline from 2012. When a firm tries to fly against the structural realities and strategic limitations, The firm is bound to face turbulence. This will hit hard when growth is fueled by debt. Orchid Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals face this adversity, unfortunately. Four principal causes: debt fueled peak infrastructure, sale of the crown jewel, sterile injectables business, therefore a revenue dip. Supply push driven revenue spike compensate for the revenue dip, therefore sort of build-up of the operational credits, and business turbulence due to a variety of external and internal factors. And as a result, the company turned a non-performing asset. The company was renamed as Orchid Pharma on September 15, 2015. And by 2017, the company went into IBC resolution. And finally, it became a Dhanuka company from April 1, 2020. Orchid reflects the need for financial strategy and business structure to be balanced while being growth oriented. But it also has some lessons how business development develops not merely business but lays down important infrastructural and institutional strengths in a company that could help the company tide over some of the most difficult and some of the most adverse environmental setbacks too. The Orchid Hospital transaction of March 2010 was a win-win transaction. However, Orchid was beset by several issues and the company accumulated new debt. Orchid had to do another carve out. The carve out of Aurangabad API unit was intended in 2012 but could take place only in 2014 because of the opposition by one leading banker in the Indian courts. This API plant supplied premium APIs, piperacillin tazobactam and carbapenems to Hospira, which were being manufactured as formulations in the acquired IKKT facility. Given the importance, Hospira proposed to acquire Aurangabad unit and related R&D facilities for a consideration of $270 million. Then a protracted legal tangle happened, with IDBI Bank filing a case against any asset sale by Orchid until its dues were cleared. This stalemate had to be resolved within the framework of RBI's corporate debt resolution mechanism in 2014. As a result, Orchid was left with only cephalosporin APIs. In a way, Orchid returned to where it started, almost. NPNC APIs and NPNC formulations and Ceph formulations along with drug discovery remained as Orchid's other businesses. But unfortunately, Orchid also got into a new debt spiral post 2010, possibly due to excessive sales at liberal credit terms to compensate for the revenue dip of the carve out of formulations. Possibly, Orchid also dealt in complex derivative instruments. The zero coupon ZDRs pressured Orchid for an aggregated single bullet repayment during this period. Strangely, the decline continued even after the second transaction of 217 million US dollars with Hospira. Both the 2010 and 2014 transactions provided a succor in financial terms of 670 million US dollars. Between 2016 and 2018, more debt seems to have got accumulated. Starting from 2010, Orchid had to restructure itself, and I have discussed some of the aspects of such restructuring. Entry into the CDR scheme in 2014 was one momentous occasion. It had the opportunity, it had the challenge of redefining its position in a more realistic terms, but I don't think the company took that option. It tried to expand its sales even with a high debt load. As a result, the company turned into a non-performing asset in 2017. Bankers brought the company under the NPA resolution process in August 2017. There were two rounds of offer for sale under the legally mandated insolvency resolution process for stressed assets. The second round has resulted in Dhanuka Group putting in a bidding bid, and that got approved in March 2020. The bid process was managed by the resolution professional from E&Y and the committee of creditors, with Alvarez and Marcel joining in the second round. The timeline of Orchid resolution was long, and the resolution went through a roller coaster, that is, up and down journey. There were also certain compulsions and missed opportunities too. The first carve out of the formulations business was under a business transfer agreement. Under that, the formulations had to be obtained from Hospira because the formulation facility for cephalosporins was an integral part of the acquired IKKT complex. and that got paused due to Hospira IKKT plant closure for a while. OPL, that is Orchid Pharma Limited, also used to receive NPNC APIs for its IKKT NPNC formulations unit, and those were being supplied from Aurangabad API unit, where also the production was halted. This also resulted in a pressure on Orchid. However, there were opportunities for Orchid under the BTA, which the company never utilized. Orchid was allowed to re-enter the sterile formulations and sterile penicillin and penem API business from April 20, but had the freedom to start developing the products, to start constructing facilities, and be completely ready for launch into the market by 2020. But the company took no action whatsoever in that direction. That was a lost opportunity. Similarly, while non-compete was there in respect of sterile injectables, there was no non-compete at all in respect of the vaccines business. Orchid Pharma could have undertaken vaccines business from day one of the business transfer agreement, that is, from 30th March 2010. We all know what happened in terms of the importance of vaccines post COVID 19. If only Orchid undertook vaccine development and vaccine manufacture, Orchid would have really turned around and would never have had the necessity to face an IBC proceeding. This was a missed opportunity of a different kind, although the BTA provided the facility for developing such businesses. On a reference by Lakshmi Vilas Bank, NCLT admitted Orchid Pharma under insolvency proceedings as an NPA. After rounds of bidding, the ownership of Orchid Pharma passed to the NUCA Group in March 2020. In the initial bidding, the renowned PE, private equity investor, Blackstone participated but did not submit a final bid. In the second round, reputed sterile injectables company Gland Pharma participated but withdrew. In the third round, the Dhanuka Group succeeded in its bid, and despite some legal challenges posed by the Accord Group, which was also competing in that round. Why did Orchid fail to attract good bids? Unexplained legacy issues of mismanagement from 2014-15 possibly eroded the value. Also, the natural decline that happened during the insolvency process also made the company less attractive. From a turnover of 1,200 crore per annum in rupees in 2017-18, Orchid's performance declined to 600 crore per annum. Over the 3 years of the NCLT bidding process, the value of bids therefore steadily declined. The performance of the company declined. The promoter lost his position and all of his shareholding. Dhanuka had a sweet deal in the end. Orchid's phenomenal asset growth was funded by high-cost debt. OPL finances came under severe pressure because of the global liquidity meltdown in 2008, hostile takeover bid by Ranbaxy in 2008, pledge of promoter shares for several years, and working capital issues increasing in intensity. But the strengths and opportunities of Orchid changed as well. The weakness and risks also changed. Therefore, when the company went into the IBC proceedings, the question in everybody's mind was whether Orchid Pharma was still a good and viable acquisition candidate. Let's look at whether it was a viable and attractive proposition. The positive side of asset-based companies is that they would have durable assets that can be leveraged in the case of difficulties. In the case of Orchid, due to the extensive business development and due to the extensive infrastructure development for the business, the company established a very broad spectrum of assets and owned a vast spectrum of intellectual property. The company retained the following assets and attributes despite the two carve-outs that were made to Hospira. One, a well-established facility infrastructure with USFDA and UK MHRA approval, catering to the residual businesses of cephalosporins and oral formulations. A global leadership position in cephalosporin APIs, oral and sterile, formulations only oral, businesses with 28 DMFs, drug master files, and 11 ANDAs, abbreviated new drug applications, covering all products that matter. A reasonably limited but important position in multi-therapeutic, non-penicillin, non-cephalosporin API and formulation businesses with 48 US DMFs and 27 ANDAs respectively. An extension of the above products, both cephalosporins and NPNC, into the EU and less regulated markets. A history of collaboration agreements in different regions with a front end in the three important developed markets. The assets include both physical assets and intellectual assets that can be monetized when in difficulty. Other strengths: strong R&D process chemistry capabilities, competent technical team which stood up and which stood with the company all through the crisis. A land bank for new greenfield projects, 45 acres in Vizag Pharma City and 5.5 acres in Roorkee. Four new chemical entities which could be further developed if desired. A novel antibiotic beta lactam molecule licensed a company at the time called Allegra, and a large multi-storied corporate office in the heart of the city, a resilient brand value which could attract additional customers and homecoming new talent if the company gets into stride with better financials, new ownership, and new leadership. The futuric investments made by the company in good times help a company to some extent, at least in difficult times, even after the carve outs, even after the sell offs. But the weaknesses due to the non performing debt continue to increase exponentially. Working capital constraints, heightened pricing and debtor pressures, lack of new products in the core cephalosporins business, a commoditized business and commoditized technology despite the complexities involved, serious and severe price pressures in the other NPNC business, a process and biotechnology R&D that has been paused, an aged API plant in sections requiring additional investments, low employee morale due to increment freezes and the delayed salary payments for years as part of the IBC activities, lack of leadership that can drive business growth and operational excellence simultaneously, and closure of certain plants by hospital for its own reasons of becoming asset light and that curtailing businesses that were previously assured. And in such circumstances, any rehabilitation of the company depended on the strengths overcoming the weaknesses of the company. What were the opportunities for Orchid as an MPA? Increase in business over a 5-year period because the bottom has been met. Established and proven US FDA compliant manufacturing infrastructure. In fact, there is no other pharmaceutical company which probably had such a financial distress despite being the best in terms of US FDA compliance and technological competence. That's the paradox of the situation. A DNA of sterile product manufactured with additional cephalosporin API sterile capacity through a new plant at Alathur. Potential to re-enter the sterile formulations business and penicillin and penem API business from 2020. Four NCEs which could be developed further to phase 2A and monetized if successful. The opportunities could be based on leveraging of the existing infrastructure and new futuristic investments. But every business comes with its risks, more so a business that has turned non performing under IPC. Revival and revving up of business may require higher than anticipated investments. Non cooperation from vendors, especially if they are not paid in full. Higher working capital requirements than projected with the planned volume growth. Unknown legal and tax issues, which may take up management bandwidth with some financial impact. Closure of IKKT CEF oral formulations and Aurangabad NPNC API facilities contributed to a loss of about 150 crore of revenue per annum. Unexpected pollution control issues may arise at Alathur, which is near the seashore, especially when capacity utilization is revved up to the full, despite having the zero discharge facilities of the highest order. Re-entry into any of the marginal businesses, example domestic formulations and NCE business, could entail major costs without any revenues. Loss of people, loss of markets, and loss of collaborative arrangements constitute key risks, while the time taken and investment required to rebuild the business could be a common risk. The regulatory filings that are owned by the company represent solid intellectual capital for any pharma company. Orchid thus built up valuable intellectual capital that provides a ready base for immediate build-up of business. What is the way forward? Infuse funds under the IBC NCLT approved financial restructuring. Despite the loss of several months in this process, arrest the fall of business from the record low levels and ensure that there are alternative avenues for the businesses that have been lost. The final selection of Dhanuka for resolution at an investment of 500 crore offered enormous scope for economic revival of the company when the company had no other option. The restructured accounts hold key to the revival of the company and viability of the investment. With the resolution friendly financial package and IBC and some additional investments post IBC, the business could be brought to an even keel and market capitalization significantly improved. After several rounds of bidding and despite dilution of value over time, the Noka emerged as the successful bidder, as I have already informed you. However, as Dhanuka planned its business model before coming into Orchid, it had four options to consider. Again, this is my estimation, not the true understanding of the facts of the case. Option 1, business model continues as it is with a new owner for the other IKKT facilities or Aurangabad facilities supporting continued oral CEFs and continued NPNC APA supplies. That is option 1. Option 2, business model continues as it is, but with Hospira or a new owner not supporting the CEF orals and NPNC APA supplies. Alternatives will need to be found by Orchid through site transfers or new facilities. Business model is restructured and simplified to focus only on end-to-end CEFs, API and formulations, and NPNC business is sold off. Shut down the entire formulations business on the ground that it may not be supported by Hospira or new owner and sell off the closed business to other formulations. Obviously, each of the options comes with its own pessimistic or optimistic assumptions and a choice has to be made. Finally, Dhanuka made the choice in terms of option 3, that is restructuring and simplification of the business model, focusing on only end-to-end cephalosporins business, API and formulations, and selling of the NPNC business, which eventually was sold off as a joint venture. When business strategy is sound and business model robust, it is possible to rebuild with minor modifications. Regardless of the route taken, any revival has to recognize and respect some basic principles that are common. The loss-making, low-scale domestic formulations business will be shut down or sold off. NCE business has to be reconstituted, external investment brought in and spun off along with IP assets. The US front end will continue until more remunerative alliance situation emerges. Biotech research and process chemistry research will need to be supported to ensure operational cost economics. A major talent induction and organizational reinforcement will be required. The pros and cons of re-entering sterile formulations and sterile APA businesses post 2020 will require detailed studies. And importantly, capital expenditure and working capital would be needed to strengthen the core businesses. Once the base business is stabilized and made remunerative, future growth can be planned with new investments. That's how revival of the business would take place. Regardless of the route taken, any revival has to recognize and respect some basic principles that are common. Orchid's corporate insolvency resolution process, CIRP, focused on this, maintaining the company as a going concern during the entire phase of insolvency proceedings. That is important to avoid the risk of liquidation. 2. Cost reduction and improved capacity utilization in parallel. 3. Business improvement through retaining customers and gaining new customers. 4. Retaining of employees and motivating them to higher performance. Once the base business is stabilized and made remunerative, future growth can be planned with new investments. You can see here Orchid's performance deterioration from 2003-15 18-month period to 2017-18, the year it got admitted under the IBC. Revenue declined by 50%, 1736 crore rupees to 649 crore rupees. Operating expenses declined but not in the same proportion. EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes and depreciation, reduced from 320 crores to 14 crores. EBITDA percentage had a steep fall from 18% to 2%. And that has been one of the reasons why Orchid found it difficult to support itself except through the IBC process. The capital structure had to be reconstituted with a large proportion of the debt being written off and the equity capital restructured to allow a favorable entry by the bidder. Companies may sell parts of businesses under financial duress, but they must use the proceeds judiciously to lift themselves up to superior performance. In case of the company, the reverse has been the case, it appears, and that explains why Orchid went through the resolution processes under IBC, even though it had two good deals in terms of monetization of the best possible assets in the company's infrastructure. The company's financial distress, I'm repeating this too. The company's financial distress has been caused by three critical factors and multiple constraints on business. First, liquidity crunch due to lower capacity utilization and supply bottlenecks. Cost increases because the original cost itself has been higher than competition. When lower capacity utilization worsened it, the company was completely uncompetitive. And losses of orders lost due to supply disruptions, working capital disruptions, and loss of customers. There were additional constraints too: absence of senior functional heads, compensation management being on hold, and therefore there was an impact in terms of the motivation of employees, letter of credit restrictions from banks, caps on forex advances, and investments for regulatory compliance. Resolution requires resolute performance to remediate the causative factors and overcome the constraints. And that's what the resolution professional Mr. Ramkumar did as the operating head of the company during IBC proceedings. He took many steps to alleviate the situation: improve sales and marketing, retain managers and workforce, ensure power availability, reduce fixed costs, optimize product portfolio, and enhance financial support. Maintain regulatory compliance, enhance MIS, innovate on working capital management, identify alternate vendors where required, and overcome COVID 19 lockdown pressures. All of these considered actions made the company sustain its performance, albeit at a low level, and remain as a reasonably attractive asset for the acquirers. The various steps have resulted in some level of improved operational performance for the company. Although still far from the mid peak, the company could regain some lost ground. Supply of high margin products to customers and products with minimal credit products all through this AARP period helped. A sum of 1,100 crore rupees, representing 31% of the claims admitted, was paid to the vendors during this AARP. As a result of various actions, the company ended up with a surplus cash of 440 crore rupees with a new working capital of 56.35 crore rupees as on the date of the Supreme Court order putting its stamp of approval on the NCLT's decision. Given that at the time of initiation of CRP, the company had only a cash balance of rupees 2.94 crores and a net working capital of only rupees 180.8 crore, the above represented a major business turnaround for the company. The case study of Orchid provides us several lessons on the best practices for business turnaround. A thorough desk research on the company, immediate engagement with all employees, defining an organization structure for turnaround, retaining key talent and motivating as required, robust cash flow management, comprehensive business plan, memorandum for takeover by a new investor, which brings out all the strengths, which brings out how the weakness will be addressed, which details the opportunities and provides a risk mitigation plan. All of this will be a part of a good memorandum. Business execution for better results and investment into the company by the new investor. Company resolution must be accompanied by steadfast business turnaround to make the asset attractive. And as we said, the investor may have options to develop the business. I talked about four different options, and the investor would look at certain specific investments that are required for each of the options. And although the base investments are unavoidable and marginal changes may be required based on the emphasis under different options, care has to be taken to see that no additional surprise investments exist. Estimated revenue and EBITDA projections, even at a very gross level, are important to see which option would be better. And that should cover revenue, expenses, EBITDA, and EBITDA percentage at the minimum. As with any other exercise of business development, the success of a decision in terms of the takeover of an NPA depends on the quality of the decision, which in turn depends on the quality of assumptions. In this case, plants are operating at very low capacity utilization, and therefore the plants are capable of rising up to the higher capacity. If the higher capacity is backed up by additional business arrangements, the terminal targets can be achieved. When benchmarked against other API manufacturers that operate in India, API's margins are lower for Orchid Pharma. Therefore, it should be possible to improve the margins based on cost optimization and technological optimization. Any revival also assumes that key intermediates such as 7-ADC and 7-ACA would continue to be available and supportive of business continuity. Any equipment transfers and site transfers to cover up for the lost businesses will be smooth and seamless with early regulatory approvals and minimal business disruptions. There will be no need for surprise investments beyond those projected. Some of the assumptions happen to be execution related, hence, an acquisition tends to be as good as the execution post acquisition. The caveats: an IBC acquisition decision is not only technical and financial, many legal, taxation, and commercial loose ends need to be tied up. The gross margin and capacity details will need detailed study product wise. The debtor and payables details, as well as loans and advances and related party transactions, need to be examined in detail. All contracts need to be studied for the warranties, representations, CAC, and non performance clauses. The tax implications on Orchid Pharma and the acquirer entities need to be studied and quantified. Implications of several direct and indirect cases need to be quantified with risk levels. The acquirer must have immunity under the NCLT umbrella for all the past actions of the company which could have adverse business and financial impact. Assuming that the performance plans pan out as projected in the model, there could be many options to bring in additional growth options, such as buyback of facilities and entry into new business lines. For now, they should remain as possibilities for the future. Many IBC cases have seen huge delays due to non technical reasons. In fact, technology keeps a case alive. There has been a tentative improvement in operational performance, and this demonstrates that turnaround is certainly possible even after the worst business setback. However, it is not easy to maintain the turnaround momentum. The new owners, Dhanuka Group, have commenced disposal of non-core businesses. An example is the transfer of NPNC IKKT formulation site to a US-based company. The company is hopeful of enhancing its growth by entering into new generation cephalosporins as potential para-4 opportunities and deriving benefit from contract manufacture of licensed NCE. Business turnaround is only the first step for a company that has faced turbulence, most of it self-made. It requires consistent and persistent business development backed by strategy and execution to reach full potential. There are three steps of building business and value. An ongoing business or a revival business gains from adopting a multi-horizon strategy from survival to growth this time. In the survival mode, stabilize the business in terms of financial, operational, organizational, commercial, and infrastructure related domains. Second, scale up the business, restore and grow market presence, increase capacities, improve cost and price performance, increase the regulatory submissions. In the third stage, that is the growth mode, diversify the business, secure more big pharma contracts, globalize sales fully, develop and commercialize additional molecules, develop novel molecules and combinations for licensing. So, stabilization of the business should ideally occur in the first year, scaling up of the business in the second and third years, and diversification of the business in the fourth and fifth years. Orchid Pharma in the second year is now poised to restructure itself as a leaner business set on a consolidation and growth path. I have given here a multi-year financial profile of standalone profit and loss account and balance sheet of Orchid. This is not the best way of detailing all the financial parameters, but for the purpose of our lecture, it is important that you have a bird's eye view and no more than that for understanding how Orchid went through its saga. The second blue table below has the details from 2003-04 to 2011-12, and the top blue table has from 2011-12 to 21-22. You can see that the revenues continuously grew from 2003-04, which was at 686.97 rupee crore, to 1946.35 crores in the 18-month period of FY13 and 1792.14 crores in the 12-month period of 2011-12. However, from then onwards, the turnover declined sharply, the worst being in 2020-21 of 457 crores. The PAT, which was a healthy 31 crores in 2003-04, continued to increase from time to time, touched a peak of 333.81 crore rupees in 2009-10. Thereafter, it started declining and faced the worst level of PAT in 2016-17 with a loss of 488.54 crores. The balance sheet summary also traces similar decline. The shareholder funds, which increased from 419 crores in 2003-04 to as much as 1195 crores in 2011-12, saw the shareholder funds being wiped out because of the losses. And by 2018-19, 1 year before the CARP conclusion, the shareholder funds represented a negative net worth of 755 crore rupees. The total capital and liabilities, which were 1422.53 crores in 2003-04, shot up to 3,947 crores in 2011-12 and remained at such high levels until the IBC processes resolved the balance sheet issues. Another factor is that the contingent liabilities, an off-balance sheet item, ballooned from 217 crore rupees in 2003-04 to 617.45 crore rupees in 2011-12. This has also been one of the causes for the financial stress of the company. So, an excellent business strategy and outstanding execution also got derailed by financial mismanagement, so to say, of the overall finances. Part of the financial management could be due to extensive aggression in terms of pricing of the products, trying to spike up the revenues, or having liabilities that were not exercised or impaired at the right time or paid back at the right time. Example, the GDR. So those are the kinds of things which impact an otherwise technologically competent, strategically forward-looking organization and bring it down to a situation where it had to become a non-performing asset. It is to be hoped that the company under a new group with more prudent financial management see better success again in the years to come and will get back its lost glory. With this, we come to the end of this lecture. Thank you very much for your kind attention.